And moving on, Israel has confirmed that it has taken control of the Palestinian side of the crossing between Gaza and Egypt. This is the only Gaza border crossing that was not controlled by Israel and has served as the entry point for much of the limited humanitarian aid that has entered Gaza. Egypt has condemned Israel's move, calling it a dangerous escalation. The country's military also called on the Israeli side to stay away from policies that would threaten a potential truce. Meanwhile, truce talks are to resume in Cairo after Israel said terms which Hamas had agreed to were unacceptable. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejected it as far from Israel's basic requirements.
In spite of this warning and this request, the attack started yesterday night. I am afraid that this is going to cause again a lot of casualties, civilian casualties. Whatever they say, there are 600,000 children in Gaza. They will be pushed to the so-called safe zones. There is no safe zones in Gaza.
In a response from Hamas to the hostage deal. We're currently reviewing that response, and we're discussing it with our partners in the region.
To take this discussion ahead, I'm now joined by former Ambassador Anil Trigunayat. He's also a distinguished fellow at the Vivekananda International Foundation. Ambassador Trigunayat, thank you very much for joining us here on CNBC TV18. Let me begin by asking you the implications of Israel now starting operations in Rafah, seizing control of the Palestinian side of the Rafah crossing.
Well, the first and the foremost implication will be the further deterioration of the humanitarian aid and the more problems for the already besieged Gazans, the Palestinians. Almost 1.4 million people are there in Rafah at the moment who have been just pushed around that. So they will be suffering a great deal, and it has been feared by everyone, including the United States, which have tried to dissuade Netanyahu from going further ahead into Rafah. The second implication, which is more, I would say, difficult for the region, is that Egypt and Israel have had the first treaty in the region, peace treaty, as they say, since 1979. And that was one of the main reasons that Egypt has not allowed a lot of Palestinian refugees to come into its side, because if any attack they did against Israel, Israel will counterattack, and then there will be possibility of a major war between Israel and Egypt, which is what they have been trying to avoid. But it looks like that this is very imminent now, especially as we see also that there have been very frantic efforts by US, Egypt, and Qatar to come to some terms, and Israeli intelligence chiefs have been participating in this in Cairo. And there have been some statements have come out. Hamas has also agreed to this kind of a deal, which Netanyahu says falls way below its essential demands. Now, if you remember that Netanyahu has said that deal or no deal, we will go into Rafah. Now, because their main objective is somehow they feel that at least 4 battalions of the Hamas leadership is there, and they expect that there are probably remaining hostages are also there in Rafah. So they just want to secure them. I doubt very much that they will be successful in it. But at the same time, this is going to be a disastrous consequence of this.
Right. Why do you think Netanyahu rejected the Hamas ceasefire proposal? Hamas had agreed to the ceasefire that had been offered by Qatar, by Egypt and other nations. What was the reason why Israel said that it falls short of our expectations?
Well, the problem is that they want to just decimate or exert pressure on Hamas. They want that there should be the release of the hostages should be first. Because in the first place, as you know, that he's facing a tremendous domestic discontent and protest against his policies. And more people are being reported killed, even during the when they are in the hostage in captivity. So I think that is one reason he wanted that there should be a release first. Second objective is to continue the war as long as he can, because this is what gives him potentially continuing in power. Because as soon as he's out, he knows that once the ceasefire happens, or he will have his own problems back home. So I think that this is more driven domestically than by his clear intent, which he says that he wants to destroy Hamas completely.
Right. What is the kind of pressure that humanitarian organizations, countries in the West are likely to put? Because you've got the Norwegian Refugee Council, others such as Red Cross, all of them have gone on to say that you're really cutting off key aid routes to Gaza, which are there actually for the civilian people.
Well, Rafah was the main, as you know, the main route. On the other hand, the Americans have been pushing Israelis to open some other routes in the north, but this was the major one through which most of the aid was coming in. And irrespective of the fact that if there is going to be a continued war, then no aid can come in, as simple as that. And so therefore, the situation, as I mentioned earlier, the humanitarian catastrophe will continue and it will be further exacerbating in this. And I don't know if the Americans have any more leverage on Netanyahu to really control him out of it.
And what could be next in terms of Israel's military plan in the region, Ambassador Trigunayat, when it comes to the immediate goals of causing harm to the Hamas terrorists? They've really gone way beyond that. So what is Netanyahu now seeking to achieve in Rafah?
Well, as I said, that in my view, Netanyahu is probably just trying to extend his own stay in power as long as he can. And as long as the war continues, there is a war cabinet, he is still in power. Because you know that there are several cases going on against him. He also has the problems that happened, security breaches. His intelligence chief had resigned, as you know. So there are accountability that will begin now for him after this war is over. So what he wants to show is that he has at least achieved one objective, that is clearing it out of Hamas. But that's unlikely because we are hearing from Israeli sources that some of these Hamas groups have regrouped in northern Gaza and are attacking from there. Besides, Hamas is also an ideology. And I wonder that if by sheer force you are going to decimate it or contain it, it has to be fought with another better ideology. And security cannot be the only ideology to contend with it.
Right. Finally, Ambassador Trigunayat, if we were to ask you about the implications of crossing into Rafah, seizing the Palestinian side of the border, what could this lead to in terms of a larger crisis in the Middle East?
Well, I think that now, as you know, Saudi Arabia has condemned this act and in a very, very severe manner today, which is what the Israelis and the Americans have been trying to normalize ties with. So they are all going to be under more stress now. Because at this stage, I think that if they have already controlled the Rafah Palestinian side of the Rafah border, but if the people start pushing out into Egypt and the Egyptian forces also are pretty strong and they start responding to it, so then there is going to be direct conflict, and that there will be an Arab-Israel conflict that is very likely to happen. So it will happen on the other side, not only by Houthis in Red Sea or the Hezbollah in Syria and Lebanon, but it could also open up another front for them, which will be very difficult for Netanyahu to continue to do so. And I think that this is the high time that the Americans did their best to stop this.
Right. But it seems that US is not making those efforts, even though there are repeated trips by Secretary Blinken to Israel. He's also meeting other Western leaders. There is a conversation going on with the Qataris to make sure that some sort of solution is reached. But the US leverage in the region seems to continue to go down. What do you think are complications because of which US is not putting a brake on those military supplies to Israel?
Well, I think that the US is committed to ensure the safety and security of Israel. That's as a matter of policy. That is their primary policy within the region. Secondly, the Jewish lobby in the United States virtually controls their foreign policy. So when a question of Israel's survival, as it is being projected today by Netanyahu and his government, comes to, then all the Jews obviously get together and try to pressure every single government in the United States to do their bit. And today, the only country that has any leverage over left, I would say much decimated, it seems like, because Netanyahu does not appear to be listening to them so much, or he listens to them briefly and then goes back to what he is originally wanting, unless there is some understanding between the two. We don't know. But at the same time, the United States overtly is very much worried about it, and they have given several warnings to Netanyahu and asked him not to do so. Kirby's statement also says the same thing, that they don't want the Rafah to go on. So despite that, but they need to do something, because see, if you continue on the one side, you are supplying arms, ammunition. On the other side, you are just making some statements for the two-state solution, and then you and the UN Security Council veto it. Now this conveys the hypocritical approach, and that's why the US is losing credibility in this whole bargain.
Right. My final question would be about India. How do you think India's policy towards Israel is going to emerge once the elections are over, or you think there's going to be no change in the India policy?
Well, I don't think that there is going to be any change in India's policy post-elections, because, see, now we have dehyphenated our policy in the region. India's Prime Minister Modi, I would say the West Asia policy has been a great success on a bilateral basis. We have also started moving into some of the regional and sub-regional cooperation, like the I2U2 and IMEC and all that. But at the same time, I don't see there is going to be any major change in our policy. Of course, India wants the peace in the region, because security and stability of the region is very important for us. It directly impacts on our own security and stability and our own well-being. And therefore, India, in my view, should try to take a little more proactive stance at this stage, at least to be seen to be doing something to ease the crisis.
All right. Thank you very much, Ambassador Trigunayat, for joining us on the program. On to other headlines.